Shundandem Gumbo Jahorayang La Sham Zalo Ganga Lo Journey Journey Turnam Dora Journey Dongan Chivjan Journey the Granama Kando Chibur Mara Mandor Dummer Jezervin Rozo Gamla Voxir Darze and Laundry and those Ritter Chipton Yamon only did Chajo John the Jamara Manzer Dawaram Nika Journey on the Ratron Donate Don Subject Darson and then Lizor Yachet work. Chipjo Jadon Journey Yantro Dolon Manser and Jahara Yala and the Marabazana do Marabazana do Marabazana do Marabazana Marabazana the Children Jim Jinro was ready, Donald the member of the Kadon Tanju Johnny Toba. All right, today we are all gathered together here at what is truly considered the very physical center of our vibrant Dharma Center, which is located right here in the heart of New York City, in the main hall of the community center established by our society. To begin, I would like to offer a brief Dharma talk for everyone here. In fact, looking back historically, it is worth remembering that it was in the year 1993 that we were all gathered here. At that specific time when His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok came to visit, we all very much hoped. It was our sincere aspiration to establish a proper and well-equipped center, a dedicated Dharma hall, for the comprehensive study and dedicated practice of the profound teachings of both Vajrayana and Sutrayana. At that time, by relying on various favorable conditions, we were fortunate enough to successfully establish such a center here as well. We are now going to present some important and directly related information that has been gathered from the specific historical period we are currently examining. This information was also widely reported on in several major American media outlets. This includes a number of notable publications, for instance, the World Journal. The thing to keep in mind is that at that time there really were not that many people around. The total count of individuals who were in attendance was actually quite comparable to the number of people that we currently have with us here today. There was a particular group of people who had gathered together, and during that period in time, it was in fact officially known as the Larung Sutra and Tantra Center. His Holiness himself was also feeling exceptionally pleased. He, the Venerable Master, joyfully bestowed his blessings upon the Buddhist practitioners gathered here. Because of this auspicious connection, we also developed the sincere aspiration to help spread the precious Dharma teachings and to benefit all sentient beings well into the future. And from that time all the way up until today, although this particular center, this was because, as everyone is well aware, at that point in time, it was certainly not an easy task to establish a new center in this location. For one thing, every inch of land is incredibly precious, and this is especially true here in the United States. Consequently, the process of buying property and then building a new Dharma center proved to be a particularly difficult challenge. The situation we encountered proved to be considerably more difficult when we were operating in the city of New York. As time progressed, this was primarily because of the established connection we had with the Buddhist Academy, and that connection specifically refers to the important link between our New York branch and the Academy itself. Back then, information wasn't as accessible as it is today. In today's world, people in China and those living abroad can easily connect through video chat, Weibo, or WeChat, allowing them to stay in touch on a daily basis. However, this was not always the case. In the past, the situation was quite different. For example, when we stayed abroad for over 3 months, we found we had basically no reliable way to communicate with the Buddhist Academy. At that time, there was a particular kind of phone called a dageda, a really, really big one. And the cost was astonishing. It was dozens of dollars per minute. When we arrived in Hawaii, our initial plan was to make a call to the Buddhist Academy from that location. However, as it happened, the only telephone available in that area belonged to the director of the Ganzi Prefecture Public Security Bureau. Therefore, I decided to call that person instead. In the end, we talked for just a few minutes. We told them that we had arrived safely in the United States. But later, one of the accompanying Indian Khenpo said, "This is too expensive. You shouldn't waste other people's money." I was also feeling quite nervous at that time. So it was actually only when we returned to the city of Chengdu that we finally found out about the whole situation with the information we were given. Back in those particular days, The organization known as the New York Exoteric and Esoteric Center also managed to keep things going for a while. But later on, it seems that there were also some significant difficulties. Indeed, there were certain difficulties. I heard that during that particular time, those Buddhists and dedicated practitioners, including our main core members, back then, I believe I should have been the president of the organization. And there were vice presidents and others under me. They are still around. But this time we also didn't manage to get in touch, and it was the same last year. Last year, some of them told me they were also looking for me. I was also planning to look for them because 20 years ago, although it wasn't a very long time, during the period when His Holiness was in the US, we still made some plans, and at that time there were some things, but later on, due to various circumstances, we ended up letting it go. And so up until today, and over these past few years, as you all know, before the year 2013, the necessary conditions for me to come here had basically not yet fully matured. But then, starting from around 2006, which was when the association first began its group practice sessions, as the practice entered its later stages, the team from the United States made significant progress, eventually closing the gap. In the beginning, it was clear that it hadn't quite caught up, but over time, it did manage to essentially close the gap. Prior to that, we also held the impression that there were significantly more people in China. When it comes to operating overseas, one significant issue is the time difference that we have here, which can be difficult. In addition to that, the fundamental ways of thinking in the East and the West are quite different. Some of our particular practice methods and our truly foundational teachings, Westerners, at least for now, may not be able to fully embrace them immediately. So when I was first starting out, my original intention was to concentrate exclusively on China, but then later on I actually came to see that this was in fact happening here as well. There are actually a lot of Chinese people no matter where you go. It seems that no matter where Chinese people go in the world, they continue to hold on to this way of thinking. They seem never gave up. In addition, their faith in Buddhism has always been very strong and has remained unwavering. As a result of this, in the subsequent period, we also went on to utilize a variety of different methods and approaches in order to establish study associations in numerous locations overseas. After setting up these associations, the results have been very good. From my personal point of view, although it is true that wherever groups of people gather, there will inevitably be some conflicts and a variety of different opinions, and all sorts of other complicated matters, pursuing an education through studying is still a much better choice than not studying. For each person's transformation, studying is beneficial. Is it better to have an organized association or not to have one? It's still better to have an organization. Without one, you'll find that many people might just gradually drift away on their own. In the end, it becomes like fishing for a needle in the vast open sea. There's simply no way to bring them back. The connection with me would also be lost, and there would be nothing I could do. It would be very difficult for us to communicate with each other, whether it's in terms of divine blessings, management, or dedicated study. There are certain difficulties in many aspects. Later, even though all of us, speaking for myself, I must admit I also have some difficulties. You see, there are so many places around the world now. Regarding the individuals who have made the decision to become members of the association, it is crucial to understand that the act of joining does not mean they instantaneously or automatically transform into a fully realized bodhisattva. In fact, some of us may even, after studying Buddhism, we eventually become more aware of our own personal shortcomings. Looking back in the past, we were generally more carefree and felt more unrestrained in society. At that time, it's because we didn't really know what was wrong and what wasn't. Once you start studying Buddhism and use the mirror of Buddhist teachings to reflect on yourself, you begin to realize that in many different areas of your life, you might not be acting in accordance with the Dharma. At that time, there is also a kind of inner struggle, feeling like, what should I do? Now, this isn't in line with the Dharma, and that isn't either. And then, when you try to learn, sometimes you can't keep up, and you feel this pressure. There's pressure from life, pressure from studying, and on top of that, the pressure from Buddhist practice and study. Because of this, some people feel that when individuals face significant pressure, it's common for their mood to be negatively impacted. This isn't only during stressful times. Their usual state can also be challenging as they deal with many difficulties. Overall, it's a widely acknowledged truth that this experience is universal, whether here in our country or abroad. It's clear that in today's world, many of us are genuinely having a hard time. However, with a learning platform such as this, once we begin to use it, we can experience truly significant changes in both our physical and mental well-being. I believe for everyone present, we understand this process isn't easy, which is why this kind of guidance is so valuable. From my personal point of view, I feel that a great number of people nowadays are genuinely very fulfilled in their enthusiastic spirit of learning. And yet it seems that almost everyone, including some of the Dharma friends with whom I have personally interacted, will often express the feeling that they are not practicing quite as diligently as they would like to be. Because of this, they tend to feel a bit ashamed and are sometimes even embarrassed. Most people who talk to me say this, but this might be because we tend to emphasize the negative aspects a bit more. On the positive side, it's true that individuals residing in large urban environments are extremely busy these days, without the right view of cause and effect, and without the guidance of good teachers. Without systematic study, people are especially confused. In this state of confusion, it's as if we're living in a world shrouded in clouds and mist, and yet we still manage to find our way along a path that moves us toward the light. Furthermore, we generally possess a fundamental grounding in our values and a specific goal in life. And as we move forward toward this important goal, the reality is that even though things don't always go smoothly, and certainly there may be quite a few obstacles along the way, overall, looking back, if we hadn't been truly fortunate enough to encounter the Dharma, and if we hadn't made the choice to continue to study it, it is entirely possible that we would still find ourselves to be endlessly lost and completely confused. If we continue to keep clinging to and being deeply attached to the cycle of samsara and various worldly matters, it is quite possible that we may never attain any pure land at all. But right now we have been given such a truly unique opportunity, such a remarkable chance. From this moment forward, it is entirely possible that our fundamental understanding of life will begin to evolve, becoming noticeably different from our previous perspectives. This profound kind of realization is genuinely quite difficult to come by. This is because in our contemporary world, as is commonly known, the majority of people tend to rely on external material possessions as their primary means to satisfy their minds and stimulate their hearts. That's the state we're in, but to rely entirely on our inner cultivation and on methods of adjusting our minds to gain satisfaction and happiness is considered to be almost negligible, and it is also extremely rare. In such a world, we have still managed to find our own faith, to find a place of refuge for our lives. Whether you are an American, a New Yorker, or a Beijinger, as we have mentioned just a bit earlier, some are actually from Chengdu. When I mention the city of Chengdu, it gives me a feeling that is surprisingly familiar to me. But from the sound of it, it seems like you aren't speaking Sichuanese, is that correct? The Chengdu dialect specifically? That's not bad. Oh, so you can speak the Chengdu dialect. They're from Chengdu. Well, that's certainly much better. However, I should be completely honest. The actual truth is that I can't really speak Chengdu dialect myself. I can understand Sichuanese when I hear it, but it seems like my way of speaking is really a mix of influences, and I know it doesn't always sound quite right. In the deeply sacred Kalachakra mandala that we are going to visit together today, when I first came, I worked as a translator. I was so embarrassed to even listen to myself speak. The reason was that at the beginning, I hadn't really had the opportunity to systematically study the Chinese language. I only started school when I was 16 years old, and during that time we were basically fighting every single day, all the time. Back then there were no teachers to teach Chinese. Some Tibetan teachers would substitute and teach the classes. When His Holiness had first made the arrangements for me to come over, to be honest, my Chinese foundation was still very weak. At that time, I honestly thought I was pretty good, thinking I understood Chinese quite well. Then, I remember someone said to me, "Your Mandarin isn't very good." I was really genuinely angry when I heard that, but looking back on that experience now, it's a little better now. I don't even know how I managed to end up like this in the process. If I were honestly still the same way I was previously, that would be absolutely dreadful. I don't even know if my language is Chengdu dialect or... I'm not convinced that what I just said is actually Sichuan dialect. To be honest, I don't really know what it is at all. And now I'm also trying to figure out why I even brought that topic up in the first place. Huh? Where was I going with that? Even though it is true that you're American, That's correct, isn't it? Yes, it's an undeniable fact that even though a large number of you have adopted lifestyles and daily routines that are much more closely aligned with and heavily influenced by the prevailing aspects and values of modern Western culture, yesterday I had the opportunity to engage in a conversation with a university professor, and I must say a significant number of the insights and perspectives he shared during our talk were genuinely compelling and made a great deal of sense to me. He has really adapted and fits in here very well, which makes sense because he has been living in this place for well over 20 years now. So I jokingly mentioned to him that if he were to ever return, it's possible many of his current ideas might not quite fit in anymore. He's really adapted, that's for sure, but some things, maybe it's because people's destinies, or what you could also refer to as their karma, are fundamentally different. It's also possible that some of you, at the very beginning, might not have lived in this particular location either. But later, some people ended up living here for good. There are cases like that too. Some people might have spent the first half of their lives here. Today, I read an article which proposed that in the first half of a person's life, they might do everything within their power to get to America. Then, in the second half of their life, they do everything they can to make their way back home. The change mentioned in this article is sometimes also due to differences in an individual's karma. No matter what, maybe it is because of some significant changes that have occurred in the overall environment. But I always feel that our dedicated study of Buddhist teachings is genuinely and profoundly beneficial for our day-to-day lives. This is true even if we don't talk about attaining enlightenment, the perfect state of complete enlightenment in the future, or gaining a human body and good fortune, or the various merits and blessings in future lives. Let's set those aside for now. There will, without a single doubt, be truly tremendous and absolutely inconceivable merits and positive benefits for everyone. For now, just speaking from the perspective of this life, whether you are in the East or the West, in whatever kind of environment we may find ourselves in, if we have the essential support that comes from this kind of faith and its daily practice, it proves to be something that is genuinely and profoundly helpful. Yesterday, when I was giving a particular teaching to the Tibetan community in a church, I also made the point and said that some of our younger generation of Tibetans, after coming over to live in the West, may very well become completely and totally westernized. But in actuality, this is also a consequence of them not holding on to their own faith with sufficient conviction. If you can genuinely and steadfastly uphold your personal faith, even in such a challenging environment, then a different result is certainly possible. You should definitely still maintain your own personal practice. As His Holiness said, do not abandon your own path, do not disturb the minds of others. Regarding do not abandon your own path, if we are practitioners ourselves, the fundamental ethics and professional conduct of a practitioner, along with their entire personal outlook and deeply held faith, should absolutely not be abandoned or compromised. Although we may not have the ability, for example, to fully grasp the way Westerners think, because some of their ideas are deeply rooted in Christianity, it's true that some people are atheistic, meaning they don't acknowledge any faith at all, while others might simply have a more critical or skeptical mindset. And while we may not have the ability to persuade everyone, the important thing is that I can maintain my own personal faith. If we want to maintain our faith, it is essential that we first gain a deeper understanding of some of the principles of Buddhism for ourselves. These principles are considered the foundation of Buddhist studies. If we lack this foundation, whether you are a Han Buddhist or we Tibetans who are Buddhists, we can all be shaken in our faith. In Tibet, we are a people where it is generally true that everyone believes very deeply in religion. But there are some individuals who, in the past, never really studied or reflected deeply. They only had a kind of faith similar to burning incense and worshipping Buddha, reciting Om Mani Padme Hum with their prayer beads every day. But later, for a variety of complex reasons, people began to migrate and settle in this region, coming from the neighboring countries of India, Bhutan, and Nepal, because they themselves did not have a particularly solid foundation in study and contemplation. Later, when various Western ideas came into contact with their lives, you could say they were exposed to them for a period of time. And in addition, their own children. They might be attending some government or private schools here, where they speak English every single day, and they also receive some education that in many ways directly contradicts the fundamental Buddhist teachings. So, As a result of this, gradually over time, those individuals without a solid foundation in their own faith will inevitably be influenced. Many people, including some of the Tibetans who are among us, are now losing their faith in what I would call a very serious way. For some middle-aged individuals in particular, their faith appears to be on the verge of disappearing completely, with only a tiny, fragile bit of it remaining. I have observed this firsthand in my interactions with them. For example, just yesterday, I made an attempt to refute their arguments, but in a much more tactful and diplomatic way, by simply saying, "You really should take a moment to think for yourselves." As for me, after so many years, I've also come into contact with all kinds of people, but I have never once wavered in my own personal faith. I have always firmly believed that whether it is the profound blessings of the enlightened Buddhas and the compassionate bodhisattvas, those extraordinary things in Buddhism, let's put aside concepts like emptiness, freedom from elaboration, luminosity, or dzogchen. In life, when we encounter suffering, we understand that this is the result of karma from our past lives. Because sometimes in our daily lives, there are many things that truly aren't something I could have anticipated in this lifetime. It must be an invisible force of karma. What Buddhism teaches is exactly like this. These are principles that fit perfectly. When we encounter certain situations, after sincerely praying to the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and our most respected teachers, the blessings we ultimately receive also possess incredible power. We truly and genuinely have a deep and unwavering faith in a great many of these very same principles. So yesterday, I spoke to these Tibetans in the same way. All of you Dharma friends present here today at the Society, you already have a certain foundation in listening and contemplation, which is excellent. Every week you will continue to study Entering the Path of the Bodhisattva and Words of My Perfect Teacher. You have been learning consistently, just as always. I am also very grateful to those who provide us with this practice venue. Otherwise, if we didn't have the benefit of a dedicated physical environment available to us right here, or the favorable circumstances that come with it, and were instead required to depend completely on the internet or on a range of other virtual platforms. Sometimes the strength of that kind of support isn't very strong, because when we all gather together in person, everyone is able to practice together. And when we study together, drink some tea together, discuss together, and simply chat together, sometimes we might feel that we're not doing well, that we're not learning enough. Other times we feel that things are actually going pretty well. Not as good as those above, but better than those below. Many people start learning, but most of them have dropped out. Some people tell me, "I'm not learning well." I ask them, "Are you still studying now?" They often say, "Yes, I am still studying." Well, if you are still studying, that is actually already pretty good. If you are not dead yet, and if you are still alive, that can also be considered a kind of success. So for all of us who are living in such an incredibly important city like New York City, we still have a system for listening to, contemplating, and practicing the Dharma. This is extremely important. In the next couple of days at our Society's meetings with some of our dedicated volunteers, I also want to talk about the fundamental importance of listening, contemplating, and then practicing. Of course, I have talked about this a great deal in different settings, including in other places. Some time ago at a board meeting in Chengdu, I have also talked about some of these things in the past, and I'm quite sure that many of you have probably already seen those materials. By adopting this approach, we can better align ourselves with the contemporary management practices and academic methodologies prevalent in international settings. For this reason, it is imperative that we continue to actively promote its widespread adoption. After all, our society is currently at a point where a group that is gradually being refined and more deeply integrated over time. In the process of the work we do together, there are certainly moments when everyone feels genuinely satisfied. And sometimes there are feelings of dissatisfaction as well. Whenever I go out, there are many people who have compliments for me, and there are also many people who speak ill of me. Sometimes for no reason at all. Some people are unhappy. It's the same for you as well. If you do nothing and just sit there, everyone is happy and thinks you're a good person. But as soon as you do even a little something, then everyone around you will begin to criticize your choices and make all sorts of unsolicited comments. Behind your back, people will start to slander your name, complain about your actions, and portray themselves as the victims in the situation. There are many situations like this. This is a very common and basic human reaction, and it's true that many people are like this. However, it's important that we always strive not to go against our own conscience. We should act and learn with genuine sincerity that comes from the heart. It is also important that we continue to learn in a consistent and sustainable way for our own personal growth. This is, without question, the single most important aspiration for our entire team at this present moment. And for that very reason, today, we also want to take some time to talk to everyone here in more detail about this. One important thing to note is that we have now successfully managed to establish and operate a platform of this nature right here in a major city such as this one. This makes me especially happy, because I was also just thinking about this. When His Holiness was here with us during his visit in New York, he established a wonderful Dharma center, very much like this one. And it was his intention, he wanted to name it specifically as a center for the complete study of both Sutra and Tantra Buddhism. This was, in fact, a truly special and exceptionally auspicious beginning. And for my part, I can say that I myself firmly believe that the blessings of the Guru are truly inconceivable. Even if he just made a seemingly simple joke, it could still potentially bring immense benefits and a truly profound transformation to the entire course of one's life. Here in New York, more than 20 years ago, we had this collective opportunity to study together. Actually, our fundamental goal at that time was really very simple. We just wanted to share the teachings of the Dharma with a great many people so that they could truly understand it, practice it in their daily lives, and so that everyone could have the opportunity to engage in practice. It is a well-known fact that in the Western world, a significant development began as early as the 1960s and 70s with the initial spread of Tibetan Buddhism. This early phase of introduction was widely considered to be quite successful, laying the groundwork for its future growth and establishing a lasting presence. But on the other hand, most of this knowledge was traditionally passed down through formal empowerments and blessings from a teacher. This meant there were very few opportunities available for what could be considered truly free and independent study. So in more recent years, when we came here to give free teachings openly to everyone, many people became quite suspicious. They were left wondering why these people would be willing to teach for free. Of course, our offering things for free is not something particularly great. In the US, many lamas who transmit the Dharma actually face a lot of difficulties themselves. It is actually always closely related to their own personal livelihood, because in any Dharma center that you can find within the United States, even just the water and electricity bills and many other aspects are very challenging. So in a number of different places, the lamas will actually charge fees for transmitting the Dharma and giving empowerments. Back when we first came here, to give you an example, the cost for a single attendance was already considered quite substantial back in those days. I remember one time at a Dharma center near Washington, D.C., known as KPC, or Kunzang Palyul Choling. This is the main center of the esteemed master, His Holiness Peno Rinpoche, and at that location, His Holiness gave a series of teachings that lasted for a full 7 days. During those 7 days of teachings, there was a Chinese girl, I think she was an international student or something like that. She had great faith in Vajrayana Buddhism. But by the 5th day, she said, "I don't have enough money now." Because as I recall, it was quite expensive each day back then. It was something like $70 per class or something around that amount. She really spent all she had to attend the teachings. By the last 2 days, she said, "I don't have enough money now." She was especially upset, but there was nothing she could do. At the time, I didn't understand English either, and she was the only Chinese person there. Sometimes I would have a conversation with her, and then a bit later on, I said, "If you genuinely have such incredibly strong faith, then I will personally cover this $200 for you." I said, "You should finish listening to all of the teachings." So I let her attend the entire event, right until the very end. To this day, I don't know where that Chinese girl is now. When His Holiness came to visit at that time, considering all the costs, including the airfare and everything else, it became clear there was nothing we could do on our side to help either. Most of us stayed at the Dharma Center, and some stayed at lay practitioners' homes. Even such a great master as His Holiness experienced situations like this. Most of the people stayed inside the Dharma Center. In fact, it was much the same back then as well. So right now, It is usually difficult for many of our Dharma centers not associated with financial matters. However, we have learned to do our very best, except for some resources that are genuinely used by the students themselves and are very transparent. We are completely open and transparent about it, and the situation was exactly the same when I first arrived here. I heard it was the same when Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro came as well. Our exchanges with everyone regarding the teachings of the Dharma are also completely carried out in a very good and constructive way. But during the initial process of getting everything established, even some people within our Tibetan Buddhism may not approve of this approach. It's worth considering that doing things this way can also be interpreted in a completely different way from another perspective. So it's natural that there are all kinds of different opinions and viewpoints, and that is perfectly normal. But what we want to clarify is that the purpose of our current study, contemplation, and practice is simply to allow everyone to genuinely learn and understand the Dharma. After having studied the Dharma in this way at a certain point in time, the profound blessings of the lineage masters enter your own heart, and it's an experience you truly can't describe in any language. There is a certain state of being that can also be attained. Yesterday, when I was talking to them, I also mentioned some of these things. I encouraged them to pray to the Guru and shared some insights about understanding the nature of mind. Even though they haven't received an empowerment ceremony, it seems that some Tibetans nowadays also don't really acknowledge Buddhism. I didn't really dare to talk about anything too profound, but I did cover the fundamental basics, for example, gaining some initial understanding of emptiness and the various methods of praying to the gurus. I also talked a bit about these, but I won't say much more here today, because in the next couple of days, some of you may find that you do not have to work or will have other available free time, and we will also have some excellent opportunities at that time. What I really want to emphasize today is that throughout the entire journey of our learning process, it is almost certain that we will encounter a wide variety of obstacles and hindrances, whether these challenges appear in terms of our family, with our own personal faith, or even within our day-to-day life and professional work. Especially now, some Chinese students studying abroad as they continue their studies. Some individuals may eventually have to return to China, which in itself presents a significant issue, right? So it's understandable that some people might find themselves facing this particular situation. Furthermore, international students in various countries, as they continue their studies abroad, often discover that their circumstances are not always very stable. And this instability can be especially pronounced within the schools themselves. For example, at our Columbia University, there are also some cases like this. So sometimes this is one aspect. Another aspect is that during our own learning process, because of family reasons or differences in thinking with Westerners, some people have no choice but to quit halfway. This kind of situation does happen. But no matter what, we absolutely cannot give up. Not giving up, however, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go completely against your family or your colleagues if your conditions have already run their course, but you still insist on pushing forward. Please understand that is not what I'm trying to imply. But the crucial point is that deep within your heart, in your daily actions and in your ongoing practice, you must absolutely persevere. To give you a personal example, I myself have maintained this commitment for 3 decades, and for me, I can assure you it's not because there haven't been significant obstacles along the way. Indeed, during the process of translation and practice, sometimes it's due to physical reasons, sometimes it's external factors, sometimes it even includes my own lack of wisdom. There are many areas where I just couldn't seem to make any progress. This is because when I first started out, I especially enjoyed studying the 5 great treatises on my own. I liked memorizing some Tibetan treatises and engaging in debates. I was particularly interested in this area. But when it came to teaching some courses for the Han Chinese side, I was actually quite resistant at first, because here I often encountered many management issues. Some matters were extremely complicated. If you really truly tried to study, you would find that there wasn't a great deal of actual knowledge to learn. Even handling seemingly minor issues required a great deal of time, and so I really wasn't very willing to continue living like that. But later, because my guru, His Holiness, said so, I thought to myself, there must be a much deeper meaning behind all of this. So no matter what happened, I told myself I couldn't just give up halfway, because as long as I didn't give up, then in the end, I would definitely achieve some kind of results. That was my fundamental mindset, the core principle I held on to, no matter what might have happened along the way, regardless of whether it was significant obstacles or even major disasters. I have always made it a point to persist and stay true to my own specific way of practice. And so, looking back from the perspective of my own personal experience, there may be some changes during the process of study and practice, which is a natural part of the experience, encompassing a wide variety of adjustments and modifications that may occur. Some changes are things I never even imagined, but it is a fact that changes will occur nonetheless. This is actually due to the inherent impermanence of our lifespan, which is essentially a kind of natural law. For example, you might experience changes in your work or in your confidence and in many other aspects as well. But as long as you have a guiding principle overall, the power of making aspirations is especially strong. In this way, I personally think that all of us together can probably achieve great completeness in every aspect of our learning, because our faith, I truly believe, is not really an issue for us. Otherwise, our profound faith in the Guru and the sacred three jewels would not be able to move us to shed tears of devotion so easily. Normally, you might not even be the type to cry much. Among us Tibetans, there is a very old and well-known saying. It is often said that while our eyes may appear to be dry, the tears that come from deep within are truly wet. It is certainly not a simple thing for these genuine tears to flow from eyes that seem so dry. This is a common saying we frequently encounter. Therefore, the tears of sincere gratitude that we shed for the respected Guru and the precious three jewels are actually not something that can be expressed in words. Sometimes when put into words, it just sounds so pale and inadequate. In the past, our highly respected Guru also frequently used to say that the faith one has in the Guru can be likened to the deep, heartfelt longing we naturally experience for our own parents, or the powerful yearning a person feels for their beloved. It is widely understood that such emotions are extremely strong and intense. In much the same way, if you are able to develop a similar deep and unwavering faith in your spiritual teacher, your Guru, and in the three jewels, it is as if you can never truly forget them, always and consistently keeping them in mind. This particular kind of mindset is a clear indication that you have indeed received a certain profound blessing. In the future, it will also be quite difficult for you to change in your day-to-day life. Therefore, it is my personal conviction that once you have been fortunate enough to receive such profound blessings from your Guru, then no matter what challenges or obstacles may happen in the days to come, every single person will continue to study with exceptional diligence and unwavering commitment. After studying, I believe everyone will also strive to benefit sentient beings. What we call benefiting sentient beings can also mean that when we are able to learn, we study together. Within the scope of what we can do in our lifetime, we help sentient beings as much as we can. Other than that, none of us are able to immediately place sentient beings onto the level of Buddhahood. Wow, they become a Buddha and are radiating light. There's no such thing. Throughout history, these eminent monks and great masters, when they guided sentient beings, they inspired them to give rise to bodhicitta and in the future to discern between causes and effects and to avoid committing especially grave negative actions. Many wise teachers have guided sentient beings in this way as well. We should also follow this approach. This includes everyone present here today. All of us do our utmost when it comes to discerning causes and effects, and also do our best to benefit sentient beings. And we put our full effort into study, contemplation, and practice. Other than that, it's not possible for us to be completely, utterly pure in our discipline or exceptionally diligent in study and contemplation. It's not realistic to only sleep 1 hour a night every day. That's just not possible. It's not realistic. Everyone has a whole host of afflictions, and there are all kinds of them. Not to mention you lay practitioners, even we monastics. Sometimes even monastics have a lot of troubling issues. Some people say, how can you monastics have afflictions too? Monastics can get into fights too, and they also have conflicts. Some people will say things like this. But in reality, within the monastic community, they also sometimes encounter all sorts of situations. Some people often tell me, I'm feeling extremely troubled right now. And they insist on wanting to become a monastic. They ask, does Larung accept people like me? Can I go there? Actually, among the monastics at Larung, some individuals are indeed very diligent in their study, contemplation, and practice. There are also a small number of people who are in an extremely miserable state, even more so than you might be, for a whole variety of reasons. After arriving at that place, even after ordaining, they find they still cannot resolve or dispel their personal afflictions. It is true that some people, after becoming monastics, are able to lay down many of their worldly burdens and then diligently engage in dedicated study, contemplation, and spiritual practice. In our world, however, many individual situations are not exactly the same in this regard. As for me, perhaps my studies have been rather broad and varied. On one hand, I also observe how things are in terms of worldly matters. When I went to the United States, I made an effort to learn more as well. I looked into American politics, economics, military affairs, and so on, including technology. Just a short while ago, we visited the United Nations headquarters. During the visit, I learned a great deal of valuable information that I had been eager to understand. This experience is a good reminder as I do try to pay attention to broader worldly matters. As for transcendental matters, I look into both the exoteric and esoteric traditions. And on top of that, I also have to be involved in the management side of things as well. On the surface, the Bodhi Society appears to be a large organization. Nowadays, it is considered, internationally speaking, in terms of both the number of people and the entire team dedicated to the study, contemplation, and their practice, if I may speak quite honestly and without any arrogance. Perhaps there is no other team for study, contemplation, and practice that surpasses it. At present, perhaps there is nothing like it in the entire world. There are so many members domestically and just as many internationally. But in reality, the management of this is proving to be especially difficult. And so sometimes we may, after I return, I am also really considering things in terms of the overall global high-level management structure. After some time, probably in January, we will also hold a meeting to see if we can implement some more robust systems in the future. For example, like in the United States, where there is a very good and well-established system. No matter what happens, whether individual people leave or not, it is ultimately the system that provides the necessary constraints. Currently, our association system is somewhat established on one hand, but on the other hand, in some instances, it is the case that it is not particularly well developed. Originally, I didn't plan to go to the Buddhist Institute this winter, because we are about to go on holiday. But later, due to some management issues in the association, when I came down this year, I made a decision. The Dharma teachers in our academic affairs office have recently held a special 3-day meeting. And as a result, when it comes to our management methods, some of the existing systems have also been improved. Of course, we don't yet know for sure how things will ultimately turn out in the long run. Actually, it's worth mentioning that here some systems in the United States are especially relevant to consider. For example, when Donald Trump initially came to power, however, when it came to some of his actions, a great number of people felt that he was behaving in a way that was a bit crazy. However, he still had his own personal boundaries, and the overall system was already very well established. Therefore, such a system is without a doubt exceptionally good. Therefore, we are also thinking about this. In the future, the association will also take this into consideration. But as for the specifics, I asked our side about 70 Dharma teachers. I would also like to put forward some of my personal suggestions and thoughts. I'm also considering that in the future we could include some respected leaders from both inside and outside the country, allowing everyone to discuss these matters together as we move forward. In short, the core of this is our Dharma. We really need to look at what methods can help it remain in the world for the very long term. Besides this, for those of us who study and practice Mahayana Buddhism, we also have no personal desire for fame, profit, or wealth. There really shouldn't be any thoughts about these things. The only goal is to see how this wish-fulfilling jewel of the Dharma can be preserved for a long time in the world, and how, by relying on this foundation, we can bring significant benefit to all sentient beings, so that these sentient beings, for the time being, can attain peace of body and mind and experience other positive outcomes. More importantly, within their mental continuum, to plant the true seed of liberation. This is extremely important. I clearly see that we currently have many established centers located in the West. This is indeed very good, and the merit is also inconceivable. But as for truly listening, contemplating, and practicing, as some of you just mentioned, it's only now, in this present moment, that we truly and deeply understand what Buddhism is actually like. I also very much agree with this profound statement. If we do not diligently study and explore its teachings, we might not genuinely know what Buddhism is truly and fundamentally about. One day, when our faith is shaken, we might lose it completely in a very short time. If during this present lifetime that we indeed have now, we put in the effort ourselves and come to truly understand Buddhism personally, then no one can ever take away this profound faith from us. No one can possibly steal it. This kind of profound and unwavering faith is extremely precious and truly invaluable. So the extensive and dedicated efforts made by the entire management team of our esteemed association, including myself, I have thought about many intricate things and numerous details behind the scenes, and then our own personal causes and conditions, accumulated merit and continuous efforts. Only when all these various conditions come together do we have the opportunity to study Buddhism. In fact, studying the profound teachings of Buddhism is truly a very rare and incredibly precious opportunity. You see, even here in the United States, for a single class, as I mentioned just the other day, in many places when esteemed lamas give their valuable teachings, one class can cost approximately $80, for example, $100 or $50. There are different levels and prices. Even the cheapest item has its own price. There are all kinds of opinions regarding this. From the perspective of the true value of Buddhism, it is still worth it. But for us, we don't need to pay that much. Moreover, we ourselves also deeply rely on our profound faith. And with the truly favorable conditions that have been created by all of us diligently working together, we have indeed gained a very good and precious opportunity to study. I also sincerely hope that no matter what may happen in the future, our esteemed Dharma friends, if all the necessary conditions are present, I can come. But whether I can actually and truly come or not is quite hard to say, because sometimes when I go to many different places now, it truly seems like people don't study well enough on their own and really want me to come. Whether it's to the UK or anywhere else, it's always like this. If people don't study well on their own and I come, it's not as if just by seeing me you will immediately attain realization, nor is it some kind of instant liberation. It's just that when I come, maybe everyone becomes a bit more focused and the atmosphere improves a little. But if we lack self-motivation, then after I leave, by the next day things will calm down again. If there's no effort, it simply won't work. So right now, the most important thing is for everyone to make aspirations. I'm also doing my best to teach in various places. In these few years, it has become more convenient and accessible for me to travel. So as a result, I have been extensively traveling to various places and destinations everywhere. Although sometimes in various Dharma centers, except for very special circumstances, it's basically impossible to visit them all. For example, in mainland China, it's just not really possible. There are literally hundreds of Dharma centers in a single city. If I were to visit each one individually, it would be extremely exhausting and simply not feasible. But for some of the more important international centers abroad, I do try to visit them as well, To encourage everyone, this really is not an easy task. When we first arrived at these locations, many of the centers were also quite small in size, but they played a very significant and important role. Therefore, if there are indeed some important community centers located within the city, it is truly worthwhile for all of us to diligently and collectively maintain them together. One highly effective and crucial way to maintain these invaluable centers is that everyone should consciously endeavor not to always engage in divisive discussions about right and wrong matters when gathering together in these shared spaces. There is a lay Buddhist center in my hometown. That center has about 200 people. The Khenpo in charge is indeed actually quite a very strict individual, you see. After people arrive, they are not allowed to engage in idle talk. Except for reciting scriptures and discussing the Dharma, no idle talk is permitted. Otherwise, if too much gossip is spoken, in the end, the Buddhist group seems to turn into a group focused on gossip. That is his perspective. Later, the lay Buddhist center in our hometown was managed very, very well. In the beginning, I established the prayer hall myself, and then we assigned a Khenpo to take charge. They managed everything very well, so as a community, we always try our best. We often discuss and share the teachings and practices of listening, contemplation, and meditation, focusing on the positive aspects together. As we continue to do better and better, people will naturally and quite understandably, because they receive benefits from it. Here you see we truly have no selfish motives, no any ulterior agendas whatsoever. Everyone wholeheartedly dedicates themselves to this matter, and if we do it perfectly, then naturally a good learning atmosphere develops. With a good learning atmosphere, everyone benefits more greatly. In this way, the study begins to show improvement. Therefore, in the foreseeable future, when it truly comes to maintaining the sacred Dharma center, everyone must actively work together in a concerted effort. At the same time, we should all work together to maintain unity among our fellow practitioners. Whether it is nurturing talent or managing affairs, it is essential that everyone takes responsibility and participates actively in preserving this unity for the benefit of all. This is extremely, extremely important. At present, our association truly consists of a large number of people forming a collective learning platform. Therefore, it is crucial to have skillful and flexible approaches, whether for those in the management or for the members of the Institute, so that everyone can engage easily. Everyone should have truly skillful means. We really need to consider the long-term benefits. Only then will we truly have the essential conditions for long-term survival in the future. This is also very important indeed. In the foreseeable future, we also sincerely hope that if all the necessary conditions are truly present within our esteemed association, everyone must conscientiously learn to give rise to the right and proper motivation. Today, most of us who are present here in this gathering are people who have made aspirations in various fields. This is not an easy task at all. You see, in this era, the pressure of living and thriving in a bustling city environment is incredibly great, and for everyone to be able to gather and study together harmoniously is indeed a profoundly challenging and not at all simple endeavor. Let alone studying together regularly. Even just gathering once is not an easy task at all. When it comes to worldly matters, it's often easy for everyone to get together. However, when it comes to dedicated spiritual study, many people may not have sufficient time or the necessary inclination for it. For example, when it comes to gambling, drinking tea, or chatting in the secular world, many people are interested in doing these things. No problem. If dozens of people gather together every day, at that time, they truly have both the ample time and the genuine interest. All kinds of valuable resources are readily available. But when it truly comes to the Dharma, oh, I'm sick today, or I'm not in a good mood today. Today, our boss doesn't agree, and the leaders don't agree either. In fact, there are all sorts of reasons in many places, and honestly, this situation exists almost everywhere. It often feels as if for many people, learning is not really something we do for ourselves, but for others or for some external expectation, like for some person in charge or some group, but that's not the case. Therefore, during our learning process, we should cultivate a sense of preciousness, something rare and valuable in our hearts. When we truly develop this precious mindset, it will guide and motivate us from within, allowing the power of such an intention to continually drive us forward on our path. Everything you do becomes much easier. But if we truly feel that this is something entirely dispensable, or in other words, something you could choose to study or simply not study at all, if your fundamental attitude is that it's perfectly fine to study it or not to study it, either way is completely okay, then it's absolutely certain that your overall learning experience won't be very complete or thorough. Many of you have already successfully persisted, including some who have already reached the Tantra class and some who are now practicing the preliminary practices. Doing the preliminary practices is indeed very exhausting and troublesome for people overseas, but I truly think, and I've deeply considered this particular matter for a very long time, if we only give empowerment after someone has completely finished preliminary practices in my way, it's possible some people might not make it in this lifetime. So this time I've made slight adjustments for the overseas platform, which is a bit different from what I do domestically. Of course, some other teachers might not have any requirements at all and give you the Dzogchen empowerment. That does happen. Some are extremely, extremely strict. As for me, I'm more in the middle, but later I kept thinking about it and it really stayed with me. There are some people in our study group here who have a lot of faith. But whether it's the common preliminary practices or the more uncommon specialized ones, if everyone truly had to fully and completely finish everything according to our actual and precise requirements, it really would be quite difficult for a very long period of time, at least for the present moment. So this time, after carefully thinking it over for a considerably long time myself, I've made it a little different from what I do in China. Last year and the year before, the requirements in China were still quite high. No matter who you truly were, there weren't really any special exceptions at all. Let's put that matter aside for now. You all are deeply interested in the profound Manjushri Dzogchen anyway, so as long as it does not conflict with your important work at that specific time, on the 19th of the month, our main and primary focus will be squarely on those individuals practicing the tantric teachings within the association. Previously, for those who hadn't completed the preliminary practices, regardless of what other teachers did, I have actually been quite strict about this over the past few years, but this time things are indeed a bit different abroad now. The reason is, recently there have been some individuals who will fly from Beijing or Heilongjiang on the 18th of the month to attend the event on the 19th and then fly back on the 20th. There are quite a few people like this. That's perfectly fine too. I truly believe it is quite worthwhile. If we all have unwavering faith in these secret teachings, then no matter what happens, it's completely acceptable. By comparison, all of you here certainly don't need to constantly fly back and forth like that. It's the same situation here in New York as well. That's roughly what I had intended to convey. Perhaps my explanation wasn't very organized or clearly articulated just now. What I want to offer everyone here today is a simple and profound Dharma teaching, much like this one. Back then, His Holiness, with his immense wisdom, had a significant wisdom opening practice site located at the sacred Wutai mountain. I feel that today, for all of us gathered here in this dedicated Dharma center, we are establishing a new and meaningful Dharma connection with each and every one of you. As for other important matters, we may also have some Dharma teachings and spiritual guidance. Usually, whether I talk about the words of my perfect teacher or the way of the Bodhisattva, I've already given extensive teachings on these significant topics. And we still need to keep learning continuously and without interruption. In short, as you diligently study, do not allow yourself to become weary or easily annoyed, because studying is actually a rather troublesome thing. Whether it's studying Buddhism or worldly knowledge, including things such as business or management studies, for example, they are also very tedious. There's just no way around it. But as you keep studying and learning, eventually over time, if you truly and deeply become interested, at that point, the Dharma merges with your mind and it feels like you simply have to keep learning. For example, now that we've actually reached this particular age and have been studying for so long, yet we still want to keep learning. My deep and abiding interest in diligently studying the profound teachings of the Dharma has truly never stopped or diminished in any way. It is simply the case that sometimes there is not quite enough available time, that is all. So consequently, as you consistently keep studying and delving deeper into these teachings, eventually you will really want to go a bit further and deeper in your own learning journey. At that point, your study becomes very steady and grounded. You don't necessarily need to rush around everywhere. Within your own karmic connection to the Dharma, or within a particular system of study, you can continue learning and still gain a lot from it. Otherwise, some of us, perhaps because of our own interests and preferences, run to this Dharma center today and another one tomorrow, what people commonly call wandering lay practitioners. Perhaps in this way you can truly gain a broad range of knowledge and learn more widely and extensively. But maybe in the end we ourselves became a bit undisciplined, as if we hadn't truly grasped a central theme. It's actually very important for a person to hold on to a main thread while studying. For example, back when I was studying and reflecting, especially in Tibetan areas, this was really emphasized. There were also many truly renowned and celebrated masters, indeed quite a very great number of them. You could say that at that time in Tibet it's a bit different from how things are now. Although there weren't necessarily that many people as famous as His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok, who had so many disciples, there were still many renowned masters nearby and in the surrounding areas. At first I also wanted to travel around seeking Dharma, but later it seemed that once I found this Dharma lineage, in terms of the Dharma itself, it doesn't matter which master passes it down, it's all the same. It's just that you need to use your own wisdom to choose a master who possesses true blessings, a master with whom you have a karmic connection, and a master whose profound Dharma lineage resonates deeply and truly with your own spiritual journey. Later on, I also became very resolute and firmly committed to this path. There was a Khenpo Sodargye in a place called Homage near our institute. At that particular time, he had approximately 200 or even 300 devoted disciples. I originally wanted to go pay my respects to him. He was truly remarkable. But then I really thought, as for a master, the one I already had was indeed quite sufficient, so I ultimately didn't go. Later, when he manifested parinirvana, I did feel a bit of regret. I truly should have gone to pay my respects. At that time, I was simply too arrogant. Perhaps it was because I had such great confidence in my own master, so I didn't really run around everywhere seeking others. Now, when I look back on my own life, actually I think this was a very good thing. If I had studied in an especially scattered and unfocused way, perhaps now I wouldn't even know what I was doing and would just be confused. I'm not actually against you learning other things here. That's not what I mean. It's completely fine if you want to study. We all know the rules of our study association. On a personal level, it's perfectly fine to study with any teacher. However, it's truly best to choose a qualified teacher. Otherwise, if you just follow anyone around, you might end up regretting it yourself. If you end up with nothing at all, that's not good. Other than that, from my personal perspective, I haven't restricted anyone's right to faith or to rely on good teachers. But we still have certain requirements. Within the association, we essentially follow a certain established approach and methodology. This is the advice we offer to everyone. So when it really comes to your personal future faith and your practice, it's best to meticulously choose a systematic and well-defined path, one that inherently possesses a clear and compelling main theme. If you thoughtfully adopt such an approach and methodology of learning, quite possibly within your mind, you'll receive a truly distinctive kind of blessing and a profound sense of accomplishment. Because as we diligently study, even in worldly matters, it's precisely the same. After you go to university, in the end, you still absolutely need to have a specific specialization. If you pursue a PhD or a master's degree, you might very well choose a truly significant worldly mentor, such as a dedicated and experienced doctoral advisor. After you finish your academic studies, you might then say, my doctoral advisor was so-and-so. So when your academic pursuit and intellectual engagement reach a considerably higher level of study, discerning individuals across the globe also tend to meticulously choose not something that is entirely mainstream or exclusively designed for the general public, but rather something truly distinctive and exceptionally unique among all their available options. It's exactly the same in the spiritual tradition of Buddhism for us as well. Among those Buddhists who are relatively successful in their practice, they often have at least one or even two foundational root teachers. For example, my own revered root teacher, Khenpo Sodargye, when he is chatting with people or during his practice, he often mentions two of his teachers. One of them is his previous teacher who instructed him in listening and contemplation, and this teacher is named Khenpo Padma. And the second is His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok. Although he has relied on many teachers, there are two teachers who have had a particularly powerful blessing on him. It's the same for me personally. When I first truly relied upon Khenpo Sodargye, I always deeply felt his profound blessing power. Even though he wasn't as widely famous as His Holiness, I genuinely feel that his immense kindness to me, his powerful blessings, and his compassionate support were truly extraordinary. Are really hard to put into words, these profound and deeply personal experiences. The second is His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok, which represents the ideal teacher everyone knows and respects. So when you are carefully choosing a teacher in your own life, it also profoundly depends on your own inherent wisdom and unwavering faith, as well as your own karmic connections, and a careful, detailed, and thorough consideration of all overall aspects of your situation. In the end, you will probably still have to make a choice. Just like in the secular world, people truly need to find their appropriate position at work and their place to see what they will do in the future. Should I really specialize in computer science or study a degree in economics or perhaps accounting? If I study accounting, how will I truly spend my later years? I also have such plans and important considerations. As Buddhists, it's not really okay for us to have no plans at all. Moreover, relying on a spiritual teacher is also a very strict and systematic process, a profound journey. In this particular regard, I hope that in the future, our lineage and Dharma transmission should develop and maintain their own distinctive, unique style, which would certainly be much better. That's all I will say for today. And I hope that we must continue to work hard and make persistent efforts. Shall we now recite the profound aspiration of Samantabhadra together?
Gypsum Pamato, my champion, Jidon Dumurkan, Chato, Gypsum Pamato, my champion, Jidon Dumurkan, Chat, Gypsum Pamato, my champion, Jidon Dumurkan, Chato, Sur, Umtare, Tare, Tereso, Umtare, Tare, Tereso, Umtare, Tare, Tereso, Umtare, Tare, Tereso, Umtare, Tereso, Hard, Yarindroma, Jerkajendra, Gordon Katsa, Tanjakam, the Chicken, some Chokzon, Chandra, Tendra, Kono, Dason, Yero, Show.
Let's do a simple consecration.
Umarula gangan gargan zan zarzaya dana dana baba mayra la jawa a orula da ywa gangan gargan zan zarzaya dana baba mayra la jawa sa umarula gangan gargan zan zarzaya dana baba mayra la jawa sa mi dharma itu coba wande da kan down down bad ma jarman na mi dharma itu coba wande da kata tanga da ya wate da بعد ما جرمنا يزوم يقدر ما يدرب وهندنا غنا غنا ودغنا دعوة بعد ما جرمنا يزوم نستلا عندنا كرة تدرجنا جانا مثلنا شنو نقبرصات وكم سبتاتي جرماندري سوم سبتاتي جرماندري سوم سبتاتي فماندري يسوع منجرهم بركي تراجي شو يوم تيجي تراجي شو متى تيجي تراجي جرش كوسون تيجي تراجي شو